All right, we're now continuing with the syllables as well as with the consonants and the vowels. Again, for those who have access to the Coffin book, which is a textbook I use in teaching Hebrew 1 and Hebrew 2 at Los Angeles Valley College, the vowel system by Edna Coffin is introduced on page 5, and several pages before that, she has the consonant system, of which is found on page 2. Edna Coffin is a professor at the University of Michigan. She's Israeli trained, and basically her focus is on modern Hebrew. I am not Israeli trained, though my family has lived in Israel. I've studied in Israel. I was a student at Bar Ilan University for my first year or so of university studies. My interest, however, is not just simply modern Israeli Hebrew, but also biblical Hebrew. And between biblical and modern, there are all kinds of variants that can go into Hebrew as a language, as a consonant system, as phonetics, etc., etc. That's what this class does. It gives you a little bit of each system. The biblical, let's use that term, or ancient Hebrew, and modern Israeli Hebrew. So in regard, for example, to modern Israeli Hebrew, in contrast to ancient Israeli Hebrew, if I can use that term, there are 5 letters in the Hebrew consonant system which are written different ways. In other words, there are 5 letters of the Hebrew consonants when, if they appear as the last letter, are written differently. As I write the letters on the board one more time. The letter Mem, whose numerical value is 40, as you might recall, each letter of Hebrew has a numerical value to it. The Mem letter appears like this if it's a frontal letter or medial letter of a word. At the end of the word, the Mem letter looks like this. It's completely different in form as well as in shape. This is a final Mem. The final Mem looks much different than the regular Mem. And the question is, why is there a distinction? I really couldn't tell, except a projected thought of mine goes back to my graduate school days at UCLA, where I studied Near Eastern languages, including the language known as Ugaritic. Ugaritic, so to speak, was the Canaanite language that's the forerunner of the land before the Israelites come and settle in Eretz Israel. In any case, ancient texts from the ancient world had all the letters scribbled together. There was no separation. There were no periods, no semicolons, no question marks. And it's very possible with slamming the letters together that distinction had to be made with some of the letters. I don't know if that's a valid explanation, but it works for me. The letter mem looks like this in the frontal position. The letter mem looks like this in the frontal or medial position. And a classic word that demonstrates that is the word mayim, a word that my good friend Baruch gave me when he meets me and brings me to the class structure here. I bring my own bottle of water, but as far as he's concerned, the more, the teacher, should have a contemporary fresh bottle of mayim, and he's right about that. And he gives me his bakbuk. A bakbuk. This is a bakbuk, a bottle, a bakbuk, a bakbuk. And if you're able to see carefully, the bakbuk is full of water. The water is clean, the water is cold, the water is drinkable, and I don't drink it. That's only when I need it. But in any case, a bottle of water. Notice the spelling of the word water. It begins with an M written this way. It ends with an M written this way. If I were to reverse the letters or write the word Mayan like this, it's going to be incomplete. It's not writing Hebrew from right to left. It's writing Hebrew from left to right, which I would not be shocked if people who only know how to write from left to right, like European languages, the European languages will write the word Maya from left to right rather than from right to left. Semitic languages, of which Hebrew is said to be part of, go from right to left, not from left to right. Anyway, one of the 4 letters, one of the 5 letters that has a final mem, has a final form, is a final letter. And then as I continue following the alphabet's order, the next letter is the nun. There are 2 letters of the Hebrew alphabet which follow each other, the letter mem and the letter nun, the value of 40, the value of 50. Look at the letter nun. In the frontal position, looks like this. In the frontal and medial position, it looks like this. And then the nun letter, as each letter has an association, so it is argued by scholars with something out there in the world of nature. The Nun letter has the same name, you might say, as the Hebrew word for an eel. E-E-L, that type of moving snake, I guess, that eel that moves around. If you think about an eel, I guess it looks like that in my drawing. If you straighten out that little eel, it will look like this. So all of a sudden we get the name of this letter, the Nun letter, the Nuna, the Nun, the eel letter. Well, the eel letter as a final letter is written this way. And as I write the Nun out here, I now recall something I should have began with, and that is the first letter that has a final position to it, which is the letter Kaf. See what's happening? When I write the letter Kaf, it looks like this, but as a final letter, it looks like this, with two dots alongside the final bar. That's the first of the final letters. The Kaf letter is written this way, then drop a line, it's written this way, and then where the association with the Nun comes in. In ancient Hebrew script, which I can testify and see with Dead Sea Scrolls, the final Nun and the final Kaf both look kind of the same. If this is how the handwriting appears, then a distinction needs to be made. And so the final Kaf took on another characteristic of two dots like this, and the final Nun got straightened out, I guess. But this is today's writing. Back then, handwriting, not print, was how you got across the letters. So I'm looking at it now. The final Kaf letter looks different than the frontal letter, the final Mem, the final Nun, and then we continue. The letters that come to mind now is the final Pei letter, the Pei letter, the Pei letter, and then the final Pei looks like this. The final Pei looks like this. Again, why a final letter for the Pei? I don't know. But anyway, its written form looks like this. I, however, come from an Ashkenazi background, and for many years, my way of writing a final Pei, or final Pei if you wish, is something like this. This was a European way taught to me by my teachers of old back in the 1940s, who were European migrants or survivors, some of them, of the Shoah, the final Pei. So the final Kaf, the final Mem, the final Nun, the final Pei, and then finally the Tzadi letter. The value of this letter is 90. The Tzadi letter in the final position looks like this. The Tzadi letter in the final position looks like this. And if you want to see something in comparison, the final Tzadi, the final Pei, and the letter Lamed. All three of those letters seem to have a similar type of upbringing, and then different markers are made on the top. So the Lamed looks like that, the Pei looks like that, and the Tzadi looks like that. And another thing about the Tzadi, numerical value is 90, and there's a tendency among Ashkenazim to confuse that name of the Tzadi. They don't call it a Tzadi, they call it a Tzadik, as I write now Hebrew without vowels on the board. And that word Tzadik is the Hebrew word for righteous one. And so if it's called a Tzadik, this letter, then the question has to be raised, what is so special about this Tzadi letter to be known as the righteous letter? There's nothing special about it. It's just that people have a tendency of slurring letters or slurring words or slurring sentences. The letter that follows in the Hebrew alphabet after the Tzadi is the letter Kuf. And so people have a tendency of saying Tzadi, which is the name of this letter, and then immediately adding the Kuf to the Tzadi, and the word comes off as Tzadik, as righteous one. Again, the whole idea is correct pronunciation or names. But these are the five final letters. The final Kaf, the final Mem, the final Nun, the final Pei, and the final Tzadi. And let me make sure I got my numbers. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 final letters. Okay, that's something of a review, and it's necessary. Whenever you study something new, it's important to review certain aspects because they're difficult to comprehend to begin with. How much more so when the language we have in common as you're viewing these tapes is the English language, which to my knowledge, contemporary English does not have final forms for letters. It's possible in Anglo-Saxon English, It's possible back in the days of Chaucer, there might have been some tradition of that nature, but it's certainly lost today. Okay, with that said, we then went into what's called Hebrew syllables, the Slavications of Hebrew syllables, the CV, the CVC, and then you had the CINCV, CINCVC, and then a strange syllable, CINCVCC. The main syllables of Hebrew are CV, CVC, and then the letter consonant, that's what the C stands for, followed by the letter ayin. The letter ayin is our way of identifying what's called the shvanah. And again, I will write these words out in Hebrew. The shvanah. Notice under the shin letter, I put two dots, one underneath the other. The second letter has a kamatz followed by the aleph. The second word is the nun letter with a kamatz and then ayin. And when you see the kamatz, based on the chart that we gave you, the question is it a medial kamatz? Is it a short kamatz? And what's going on here? If a vowel is a short vowel, its normal position is a closed syllable. It has to be followed by a consonant. If it's a medial vowel, it can either be open or closed. And then there's a third kamatz, which is no longer functioning and functionable, and that's the so-called long kamatz, which we don't really discuss anymore. But the shvanah means the shvada has a sound to it. The sound is not a real sound, it's a sound. Shiva. Hear how I say that word. Shiva. It's an is sound I give to it. And then there's a problem when that particular shvanah occurs with laryngeal letters. Laryngeal letters are the aleph letter, the ayin letter, the hey letter, the chet letter. That shvanah cannot appear with one of the laryngeals, and it gets transformed into what's called another half sound. Either a patah with that shva alongside of it, a sego with a shva alongside of it, or a short kamatz with that shva alongside of it. The sound of ah, the sound of eh, the sound of or, but not a legitimate ah, not a legitimate eh, not a legitimate or. It's a half ah, half eh, half or. And the only reason for that is because laryngeal letters in the throat, so it is argued, had a hard time back in the day of saying a shvanah. They got too gurgled up, you might say. Now, the letter shin does not have a laryngeal letter, so the shvanah can occur to it. But then Hebrew confuses you. There's another shva in Hebrew called a shvanah. It's called a shva. Why so? Because in appearance, both shvas look the same. You cannot identify a shvanah and a shvanah by its appearance. They both look the same. You identify it in its place in the word itself. If the shva, listen to my words, is found under the first letter of a word, it always is a shvanah. It's not closing a vowel before. On the other hand, there are certain words that precede that word, which depend on the word that follows. And if that's so, it's possible that that shva under the first letter can be seen as a shvanach, the silent shva. But to my knowledge, that normally doesn't occur. We close words that need to be closed by the next word with a dot in the next letter, and that we have yet to see. And then what about Hebrew meaning? A word that has the sound of na, spelled the way I'm spelling it, the nun and the ayin, deals with the concept of movement, as you see me moving in my slow pace. A good example of that is the word tenuah. That word tenuah, which is a word for movement, as in youth movements. You belong to a youth movement, as I did as a child. You belong to an American movement like the Boy Scouts, whatever it may be. It's a tenuah, it's a movement. And here the word in English, movement, because of activity. That's why it's called movement. But for people like this old man here, and for my students, number of them, that word tenuah has another meaning to it. And you better be very careful when you go on traffic, on freeways, and don't observe the rules of the traffic. The word tenuah is also the Hebrew word for traffic. And traffic is movement. Unless you live in Southern California, there ain't no movement in the freeways. They just simply stand still, and people get frustrated, they get out of their cars, they scream, you get a ticket. Be careful who you're screaming at. So that word tnuah, associated with a movement, associated with traffic. It deals with moving. And now you have a Hebrew terminology, the shvanah. The next word is the shvanach. If this guy is movement, you have a sound to it, and the shvanach doesn't have a sound to it, then the word is it's silent, it's resting. There's no sound to it. It's relaxing. And any word that has the nun chet to it deals with that understanding of to relax. So, for example, the word nach, as you have in Shabbat Menucha, as you have in regard to the Sabbath observance. A greeting on a Sabbath day is Shabbat Shalom, but also have a peaceful Menucha, have a peaceful rest. Notice how I'm spelling that word. That is your root, the nun and the chet. You're resting. You're not movement, meaning you're not working. You're not disturbing. You're leaving nature and yourself to be one and the same. Relax. It's a good word to know. That word nach, to relax. Take it easy. So that's where the shvanach comes in. The shvad that rests, that doesn't move. Okay, with that said, let's now take a look at these syllables. A syllable that ends with a vowel is called an open syllable. The rule of the open syllable, if the vowel, as you have your chart in front of you, is a long vowel, its normal position is an open syllable. If it is not, then the accent is over that syllable because it's irregular. If the vowel is a short vowel, of which there are 5 short vowels that we gave you, then its normal position is a closed syllable. CVC, here is a syllable closed by a consonant. Here's a syllable that's not closed, it ends with a vowel. So short vowel should be in a CVC position, long vowel should be in open position. And the medial vowel is either open or closed, either or. But if you have a long vowel in a closed situation, it's irregular, it's accented. If you have a short vowel in an open situation, it's irregular, it has to be accented. Then you have the phenomenon of a consonant followed by a shvanah. The consonant, no doubt, is one of the laryngeal letters. And so a laryngeal letter having a shvanah that follows it is not a syllable in itself. You don't have a syllable cian. It goes on with the combination that follows, either CI and CV or CI and CVC, taking these 2 syllables as my basis. And then from time to time, you get a very unusual syllable, CIN CVCC, where you have CVCC as your syllable. Okay, let's just play around with this. Do you see the word shva? Watch how I break it into syllables. I see the word shva. I ask myself and I ask the audience, how many syllables does it have? Normally you think of a syllable by the sound, shiva, but that is sound can be a half sound, as we call it, or a half vowel, and therefore look carefully. If you see a shva in the first letter, it's a shvanah. So you begin to break your syllable as C, ayin, and then you go on. You don't have a syllable ending with a shvanah. Next combination is the vav letter, originally a W sound, a W, developed into a V sound these days. So it's C ayin, right? And then you have C, then with a kamatz that follows, then an aleph at the end. This syllable is monosyllabic. If a word only has one syllable, it's monosyllabic, CI and CVC. And then we make some other observations. It looks like the aleph at the end is a consonant. It's treated that way, so we write CVC. It's also possible, if the last letter of a word ends with an aleph or ends with the hey, that these are vowel markers, vowel indicators, rather than true consonants. But for our purpose, we'll treat this as a true consonant, and the syllable is CI and CVC. If this aleph was a vowel marker for the sound of ah, then it would be CI and CV, and then you put brackets around that C to tell the reader that the last letter is really not a consonant, it's an indicator of the sound of the ah. Anyway, shva. And notice how I say the word. I say shva, I don't say shvor. If I pronounce my kamatz as an or sound, it's a short kamatz. So you might argue, but if it's a closed syllable, Professor Garber, and the kamatz is there, shouldn't that be a sign of a short vowel in a closed syllable? Let's argue that it is. But then notice what I'm doing. I'm accenting this word. A kamatz in a closed syllable, unaccented, is short. A kamatz in a closed syllable, accented, is medial. Let's repeat that again and again. A kamatz in a closed syllable, unaccented, is a short one. A kamatz in a closed syllable, accented, is medial. And a classic example of what I just said is the word korban. Let's write that word on the board right now. That word korban. Notice how I'm writing it. Notice that there is one kamatz, there's another kamatz. Notice there's a shva in the middle of the word. A shva underneath the beginning of the word, start of the word, is a shvana. But in the middle of the word, be very careful. How do you know it's a shvana or shvanach? And so I start my slavication. The kuf letter, the kamatz is a vowel, and then we have the following rule. If a shva is found under a letter which follows a short vowel, it's a shvanach. So I have a shva under a letter, and I'm assuming that this is a short kamatz, so it's a shvanach here. And notice I'm saying or. Well, what about this guy here? I got a CVC with a final nun, and the kamatz looks as identical as this one. So why is this one not also short? Because the Hebrew word has the accent traditionally on the last syllable. If the syllable were accented here and not here, then this would be a short kamatz.
So, but the Ashkenazi have the emphasis at the beginning?
The Ashkenazim don't have this problem at all. Number one, they don't accent normally what the Sephardim do, the last syllable of the word. Number two, the Ashkenazim make no distinction with the sound. When they see a kamatz, it's always an or sound. Korban. They say korban. Just hearing how I say it. Korban sounds much different than korban.
Sounds more like an O rather than
It's
an
an
ah.
O, yeah. The Ashkenazim do not sound this as an ah at all. That's not the only issue. The Ashkenazim have other distinctive linguistic differences. I'll show you one in a second. But the Ashkenazim, which I was raised in all my years until I got to, I guess, to college, the word was always korban, always was. In class, it was korban, but in the synagogue, korban.
So that's the correct karaban. Is the correct pronunciation if you're doing Sephardic?
The Sephardim,
Yeah.
they say korban. They go right. That's an or sound. That's an or accented, so it's there for ah. And it gets confusing when it comes to writing with vowels. When you say the word korban, unless you know your Hebrew spelling really well, how would you know whether it's a kamatz or a patach? That's why it's nice to write Hebrew without vowels. You know how to say the word because you vocalize it. Many people probably will write the word korban with a patach. The Ashkenazim, when they hear an ah sound, that's how they identify it, with a patach, not with a kamatz. And there's so much more we can tell you. Let me just go into a few other things. The word korban is the Hebrew word for an offering, a sacrifice. And think about the root of that word. The root, the kuf resh sebet. And one of the things we do in Hebrew is every word has a root to it, and the root has a whole lot of meaning. Any word that has a kuf resh bet has to deal with proximity or closeness or nearness. Is that so? Yes, it is so. And so a korban is an offering, but there's something else to a korban. It's an act of closeness, proximity, as your offering to Hashem. So goes the association. Why the Korban is therefore done under very strict circumstances. It's done under certain types of regulations. Can't be done just by you and me. Closeness and proximity to holiness is the implication of a Korban. Okay, let me go into other things right now. So the Kamatz accident, okay. All right, let's go into another example. The Shvanach. Notice the spelling of the word Shvanach. You see that word Shvanach? It's written with a Kamatz. I have a CVC syllable here. CVC. It's monosyllabic. There's no question it has to get the accent. And therefore the Kamatz, closed syllable, if it's not accented, will be an or sound. But it's getting accented, it's an or sound. Nach. We don't say Shvanoch, it's Shvanach. Okay, I think that would take care of that example of the C-ion and the CVC situation, or rather the CV situation. All right, let me now go on to some other words right now. What are the basic Hebrew words you learn and probably know it before you even take a class of Hebrew? It is these three letters, the Aleph, the Mem, the Tav. A good class in Hebrew not only has numerical value for these letters, not only finds the meanings in its application, but also in interpretation. The Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The Tav is the last letter. The Mem happens to be the middle letter. The beginning, the middle, and the end. And that's where we get the experience from the beginning to the end, and definitely the middle experience gives us a notion of Emet, what exactly truth is all about. And isn't that what this is supposed to be? You live a life, you pursue happiness, health, success, peace, and at the end of the day, have you found any truth? That's why you sleep at night and hope to wake up the next morning. And the first thing is, what happened? What happened yesterday? Who did I not recognize? Oh, all kinds of questions come to my mind every time I start my day, as if to say, I'm going to better my activity. I want to know the truth. And look at the spelling of that word emet. There is a chataf segol. This is called a chataf. That three letters by themselves, that vowel is called a segol.
So that makes the regular does it make it half a shorter sound?
Yeah, well, 1 second, we're not there yet. First of all, the first thing we need to know, look at the chart with the syllables, with the vowels, and know the names of the vowels. This is called a segol. The segol, she spells it as S-E-G-H-O-L. Anyway, let me just get into what's going on right now. The word chataf, the spelling of that word chataf. I double checked again and again, and this morning I found something I've never seen in my life. That's what I mean about pursuing knowledge. Don't think you've mastered anything. Every day, a new experience. That word is called chataf. The spelling of chataf is either a chet, tet, vav, a pei at the end. Notice that pei is the final letter is written this way. Or you spell that word chataf with a taf. Either spelling can come to mind. And I doubt very much that the average Israeli spells correctly the word chataf. Because the sound of a T, is it a tet sound? Is it a top sound? Both are pronounced the same way today. Back in the day, this is a ta, ta, ta. This was a ta, ta, ta sound. And there happens to be two different words, one spelled with the tet letter and one spelled with the taf letter. And we'll get to that in a second. Now let me show you what's involved here. The word emet. probably originated like this. A shvan na underneath the aleph. The aleph is a laryngeal letter. A laryngeal letter cannot take a shvana. It has to replace it by one of the hatafim, by one of the half vowels, if you want to call them that. The so-called hatafim is the A sound of a hataf patach, is the S sound of a hataf segol, or the O sound of a hataf kamatz. Written as you see a patach with a shval alongside of it, a segol with a shval alongside of it, a short kamatz with a shval alongside of it. The word emet replaced the shvana, since it cannot take a shvana laryngeal letter, with a hataf segol. How come? Because probably originally, the sound that was originally on these was an S sounding sound. So when it lost it and became a shvana, the shvana got replaced by hataf segol. The more common hataf happens to be the hataf patach. The rare hataf is the hataf kamatz. And in the middle, I guess, is the hataf segol. So again, Professor, what are you saying? I'm saying from the original is the origin of which hataf is chosen. And let's give you an example. The word sohar. Sohar. Again, go over the tapes where we told you the following. That Miya Cholam is accented or not, that Miya Cholam always draws the accent. The word is sohar, not sohar. The Miya Kamatz could be accented one place removed. The Tsere could be accented one place removed. But the Miya Cholam always draws the accent. Sohar. Sohar is the highest point in heaven with the sun. Zohar happens to be the name of the most famous Kabbalistic book, the Zohar in English. It's the highest point where the sun is seen. The sun is basically not moving. It's the earth and its rotation that gives you that moment of seeing the sun, the highest above. From that word Zohar, we get the word noon, N-O-O-N. And as I write out the word noon, I'm going to add a patach, a yud, a chirik, and mem. This marker here, we will soon show you, is the sign of a duality in Hebrew. The number 2, shnayim. The number 2, shtayim. One is masculine and one is feminine. And the notion of the noon, I guess, is a combination of the AM and the PM. And once you have that word added, the patach, the yud, chirik, mem, the accent will now be over that short vowel patach, and those first 2 letters now begin to reduce. The Miya Cholam reduces to a short kamatz. That short kamatz be part of a closed syllable, but the hay lost the shvanach and it opened up to hataf kamatz. Tzohorayim is how we say the word today. It should be tzohorayim. It's possible for a shvanach to lose its silence and to open up to a sound. But notice the O sound, because the original sound was that of an O. So if emet has a hataf segol under it, then the original sound, if I can imagine one, was an S sounding sound. Not a na, and not an O, and not a this, and not a that, an S sound. Now we're going to take the shvana and replace it with the hataf segol. And so to syllabicate this word, you have the consonant aleph, you have the hataf segol treated as a shvana, where the shvana cannot be taken by the original letters, the hatafim replace it, and the hatafim are represented by the letter ayin. Then you continue with CVC. So the word emet has 1 syllable, C-ayin, CVC. That's the hataf segol. And then you go on with other examples. Okay, you see iron words, see iron CVC. I'm thinking now of a situation of CI and CV. It doesn't just come that easily. If a word comes to mind, I would so share it to you. Okay, basically, you have a feeling right now. What about this word Sohariim? How does one break up that word into syllabication? As I write out the word to you, Sohariim, notice I have the sound of the O.
What does it mean?
Sohariim is noon.
Oh, no.
Noon. And originally it probably should have been Tsor, then Ra, Yim. And if it were that way, then we CVC, short kamatz, closed by the shvanach, a shva on the letter, followed by a short vowel. You would seat that shva as a shvanach, silent shva. The accent is over that patak, short vowel open, and the last syllable is CVC. The yud is a consonant, a chirik, and then the final mem. But it's not that way anymore. If it ever were Tsorayim, it now is Tsohorayim. There is a tendency of spoken Hebrew influencing grammatical Hebrew. No Israeli says Tsorayim. They'll say Tsohorayim. They'll keep the kamatz there, but the shvanach, they transform into a sound and it becomes a chatav kamatz. And once you see it that way, and now you're asked to syllabicate, then the first syllable is CV, second syllable is C, ayin. The chatav kamatz is treated like a shvanach. Continue with the resh, which has a patach 100. Here's a CI and CV example. And the last syllable is CVC. And notice the accent is on the second of the three syllables, short vowel, open syllable, irregular is accented. Well, how do you explain this guy here? Here you have a short kamatz, open syllable, not accented. And here's where rules of Hebrew grammar reflect another theory. The short vowel is potentially closed. It was originally closed. It got opened up. So we make an exception with those type of words. And then the word ending with the patak yud kirit mem. This is a sign of two-ness, duality, which I'll get into in a second. Okay, I think you'll have so far a feel for CV and CVC and CI and CV and CI and CVC. As we see words, we'll break them into syllables. Let me now go into two other theories. I want to go back to that word hataf in a second. But before I do that, let me just say this. There is a gender system in Hebrew. Gender. Gender means male or female. Today's Hebrew is now challenging the whole gender system. There's a tendency now found in Israel to no longer make a distinction between male and female. That will not work in Jewish religious circles, particularly traditional circles.
That's what I was thinking.
God would not be neutralized into an it or something of that nature. And the male is the male and the female is the female. But then again, there is the younger and younger and younger generations, including the generation my age, that are insisting there is a little discomfort when the female is put down. For example, the word male in English. Just take a look at your English language. The woman is called not a male, she doesn't have a special word. She has just an FE. She's a female. She's a syllable. She's not the heart of the word. You have the word steward, is a male. But then when you have a female, she's a stewardess. Ever think of that? When women have the same sound as the male, only they have an ESS added. A stewardess means less than a steward. She's a steward, all right, but she's less than the male steward. The word mister, and a woman's called a mistress. A mistress is a companion. A mister is the dominant factor. And I guess that's what's going on here. And then when it gets down to actual facts of history, keep in mind there is always this issue. What you call what happens in this world, it's history. Has it dawned on you that history is his story? What about her story? What about Eve's story rather than Adam's story? You see how complicated? And then there is that neutral word. How about saying our story? I don't know how many people are saying our story anymore. Combine the two together. Don't make a one over the other, or one against the other, or one less than the other. We stay, however, with the traditional way. And so the following is about to be said. Words that are masculine and words that are feminine. They are either singular or plural. There is no special marker of a masculine word. I'm talking in general terms now. When you see a feminine word in Hebrew, it normally would have the following final syllable. The syllable will end, X represents any Hebrew letter, a kamateh, or the word will end with a chirikyotav, or the word will end with a segotav, or the word will end with a shuriktav. So without knowing anything about the word and what it means, just by observing the spelling with vowels, a kamatse is a feminine marker, a chirikyotav is a feminine marker, a segotav is a feminine marker, a shuriktav is a feminine marker. So let's give an example or two. I'm talking about a teacher. In English, the word is teacher. You can't tell me it's male or female. In Hebrew, we have morah and we have moreh. In light of what I just said, a kamatse ending word is feminine. This is a female teacher. The chirikyotav word is less frequent. The word that comes to mind is the word brit. And here is where you could go wacko. The word brit is the Hebrew word for covenant. It's also the word associated exclusively with a male. And I ain't talking about the covenant. Or maybe I am. I'm talking about the operation on the 8th day with a knife and the force to remove called a brit. And yet the word is feminine, which ought to be a lesson to my fellow men. Your covenant is female intoxicated, just the word itself. And on a personal level, let me just say something about myself. I was circumcised on the 8th day as follows Jewish law, not at home, but in a hospital. I was a very sickly child. The Brit Milah went on. I got a call the other day from the daughter of my niece. She's pregnant, expecting a child, a male child, next week. Mazel tov. She'll get a name like my name, named after her grandfather. His name is Walter, my sister's husband, who's deceased now. We took on the Hebrew name of Ze'ev. Everything is wonderful, except the following. The baby will be circumcised by a doctor. I said, why? That's what they want. Could you have a Hebrew name afterwards? It's not for me to make their call. I was not expecting the circumcision to be done by a doctor upon birth. You can wait a little bit, but this is the way people are today. And if you're a convert to Judaism, even if you're circumcised, I have that experience in my own family. A drop of blood is necessary. It's not difficult, it's just a puncture. But the word is feminine. A word ending with a segotav. Word that ends with segotav, let's think of a word that has segotav in it. Some of these words are so rare. A segotav ending word. Igeret. The word Igeret. I happen to edit a newsletter of the Professor of Hebrew. Its name is Igeret. Igeret is an aerogram. Igeret is some kind of letter or document. It's also a news bulletin. Forget about what it means. Just look at that word. It ends with segotav. The word is treated not as a masculine word, but as feminine. And then the shur tav ending word. A popular word, at least back in my day, was going to the hanut to order your food, or go and buy your food, or buy your gifts. Today, nobody goes anywhere. Everything's a computer or cell phone. But words ending with shur tav are feminine words. The big question is, what's the big deal about knowing the gender? It's important because to use adjectives with these words, you have to have the gender. Hanut must have a feminine adjective. All these words have to have feminine adjectives. We don't say morato, we say moratova. And adjectives have the similar endings. The kamatse, the kurkutav, segotav, shurtav, normally the kamatse endings. What about a masculine noun? A masculine noun does not have a special ending to it. So if the word does not fall into these four forms here, if it's a singular word, then assume it's masculine. That's just the beginning. What about the plurals? The plurals have the following markers. If the word is a plural masculine word, let's just get the board erased a little bit. It will end with kirkud men. If the word is a feminine plural, its traditional ending is cholam tav. So when it comes to the plural endings, it's reduced to one or the other. Kirkud mem for masculine plural, and cholam tav for feminine plural. For a singular, 4 different forms for the feminine. No specific form for the masculine. So if I see a word like beged, for example, I don't see any markers of the plural with that word. I don't see any of the feminine markers. I conclude that the word coat or piece of clothing is a masculine word. In English, we have a third category. We have male, female, and new for neutral. Hebrew doesn't have neutral words. They're either masculine or feminine. And then we have exceptions. 2 stand out. Words that have the singular and the plural of 2 different genders. The word that comes to mind is the very common word shana. The plural of that word shana is not shanot, but shanim. The plural is masculine in appearance. The singular is feminine in appearance. Is the word feminine or plural in the plural as well as in the singular? Do we change the gender when it comes to plural? The answer is no. If a word has a singular and a plural of 2 different genders, you follow the gender of the singular. Shana Tova for Happy New Year, a good year, and Shanim Tovot. You don't say Shanim Tovim. Again, if the singular is of one gender, you follow the plural to be that gender as well, even though in appearance it appears to be the other gender. And then you have a word where the singular and plural appears to be of one gender, but it's not. The word that comes to mind is derech. Notice how I spell it? Derech. Notice my syllabication. Accent on that first syllable. CV. Sego is not followed by a shvanach in the next letter. So it's a short vowel, open syllable, accented. Second syllable is CVC, the final half with that shva alongside of it. looks masculine. The plural is Drachim, looks masculine, but the word is feminine, even though in appearance the word looks masculine. That's one example. The other example that stands out because of its commonality is the word Lila. Lila, the word for night. And Leilot, the plural. Word looks very feminine. But if you know some Hebrew, you say Laila Tov. You don't say Laila Tova. How come you're using the masculine? The word Laila, despite its appearance, is a masculine word. The word Derek, despite its appearance, is a feminine word. Go figure. You would not know that until it's told to you. Okay.
We're at 51 minutes. How do you want to proceed? Do you
Let-
want to
let-
continue
let-
for a while, then take a break?
Now, did we do an hour already?
No, we're at 51 minutes.
Okay, let me continue.
About 10 more minutes.
Okay, I want to continue with something else, and then we'll take a little break. The next thing is the following. All of which I've done so far is important. But let me at least end with one other concept, and then we'll continue in the same vein after a little break. That word chataf. The word chataf, do you spell it this way? The word chataf, do you spell it this way? For the Israeli sounding ears, the tet and the tav both sound the same. The spelling of the word, however, is chataf, and then I'll add the word patach. The chataf patach, again, is that marker patach with a schwa alongside of it. Chataf segol, let's write the Hebrew out, is the three dots. And the chataf kamatz, okay, but the word is chataf, spelled with a tet. And as you see that word chataf spelled with a tet, notice the vocalization. As I write out the word, let's just get it up here so it's visible. It's a C-I-N-C-V-C. Consonant, chataf, patach, consonant, vowel, consonant. What about this word here? This word here, the singular is chetef. It's not chataf. Well, if I hear the word chetef, then I know there's a distinction. If you hear the word chetef, nobody says chetef anymore. It's the spelling which bothers me. The tet and the tav get interchangeable in the spelling. Chetev means a robber. R-O-B-B-E-R.
Like armed robbery as opposed to
Yes,
Gazlan.
yes, a robber. When it comes to thieves and that type of thing, I know the word ganav. I know the word gazlan. And that's about it. I never heard the word chetev. And when people spell the chataf patach without vowels like this, they're actually spelling the word robber. The characteristic response is, well, I didn't know that. Naturally, you don't know that. That's the problem with language. The same sound for different letters. In all my 85 years, I never heard the word chetev. Ever. I double checked that dictionary. Even the word chataf, which I know how to spell, I wasn't sure completely if it's a tet or a tav. What if I wrote chetav fav? Would you know the difference? Of course not. How many rabbis could tell the difference? They cannot. Chataf, chataf. But is it a tet or a tav? And that is why, when it comes to Torah writing, every scribe that writes has to go over every letter he writes orally, carefully, because once the letter is written, it becomes sealed. And once it's sealed, it is not broken. That's why the Torah, when it's read in synagogue, is not read by a singular person. There are two people on either side that watch the reading very carefully. And if a Torah has 3 errors, it then gets wrapped up and put away. The errors have to be corrected. That's why a claim can be made. Any Torah in any synagogue, anywhere in the world, will have identical writings. It's the closest thing to perfection in Jewish ritual. Okay, we'll take a break and then we continue.